Where the river curves away eastwards towards the sea lies the city of London. Here, by Big Ben, lies the city of Westminster, one for commerce, the other for government. But between the two, though still largely in Westminster, is yet another district with a special character of its own, lying just beyond Whitehall and known as the West End. It's noisy, crowded, hectic, but basically it's the home of London's arts and entertainments, the capital's pleasure ground, its centre the statue of Eros in Piccadilly Circus. Round here are London's largest cinemas, where most films to be shown in Britain are first presented. Round here are nightclubs, dance halls, restaurants and theatres. Round here too are the busy thoroughfares of Oxford Street, Regent Street and Piccadilly, whose large department stores make this the country's most famous shopping centre, to which all the year round come provincial and overseas visitors. Not far from Piccadilly and Green Park is Savile Row, where the finest British tailoring draws customers from all over the world. But the West End is more than a shopping centre. It's a social centre, to which come business and professional men who belong to those famous London clubs with their unique traditions and atmosphere, and where, in Soho, people can dine at restaurants of every nationality. In the West End, too, are London's largest hotels, all helping to make this district more of a place where people come to enjoy themselves than a place where they live. But it began as a residential area. In the 18th century, wealthy businessmen from the City of London lived here with aristocrats from the court at Westminster, making this the centre of society and therefore of recreations and arts. So round here are the patrons of painting, the Royal Academy and art galleries. Here too is music, though the biggest concert halls are further away. Here too are the theatres, nearly 40 in the city of Westminster alone. London is the stronghold of the English stage, as it has been since Shakespeare's time. As soon as London's West End became the centre of wealthy and influential society, it was natural that artists of all kinds should come here to seek their fortune. Just as Bernard Shaw came here from Ireland to make his name as a dramatist. Just as Shakespeare came from Warwickshire in Queen Elizabeth's time. So they come here today.
Fetch hither Richard, that in common view he may surrender. So we shall proceed without suspicion.
I will be his conduct.
Lords, you that here are under our arrest, procure your sureties for your days of answer.
These are students of the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, who have come here from all over the country and Commonwealth to train for the stage. One student here making up for her role in an 18th century comedy is Jennifer Patrick from Manchester.
I came to London to train because it's such an exciting place to be in if you want to go on the stage. You feel you are right in the middle of the British theatre. And then at this drama school you get one of the best trainings possible.
Advance. Advance. Extend your arm.
Fencing has its uses in costume plays, especially for men. But in any play you have to know how to speak. I had a high-pitched squeaking voice when I came here first, but lessons like these taught me to control it, and to use my voice as an instrument for expression and feeling.
All right, that's not bad. Now, to go on working it there, please, how you can. Now, this time I want some tone exercises, kick or pops out. And I want you to feel now that your breath comes firmly from the diaphragm right up to the lips. I want you to cup your hands over your nose and mouth.
Turn it and out and
Learning how to move on the stage is another part of our training, how to act with the whole body without being self-conscious about it.
Deep, Pavla. Really centrally close. Flex knee, down right direction.
Whether one is attempting the complex verse of Shakespeare or modern plays, one has to be really dedicated to the stage. Even the most successful students here can't be sure what their future in the theatre will be, but I suppose all of us are pretty ambitious. Wherever we may go for experience, most of us want to return eventually to the London theatre.
The brittle glory shineth in his face, as brittle as the glory is the face, for there it is, cracked in 1,000 shivers. Mark, silent king, the moral of this sport, how soon my sorrow had destroyed my face.
As with drama, so with music. Here at the Royal College of Music are young musicians who, like the drama students, are following in the footsteps of artists who came to the capital in the past. Among these students is the conductor George Mickie, who came here from Edinburgh. He's 21 and is already showing a talent which may one day make him a leading orchestral conductor. Many musicians have been drawn to London. This music was written by Haydn, who came here from Austria at the end of the 18th century and wrote 12 symphonies for the London public, of which this was one. As a child prodigy, Mozart also came here from Austria, and he too wrote a London symphony. Handel and Mendelssohn from Germany were others whom Londoners received with enthusiasm. Among those who feted Mendelssohn were Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert. The prince was a musician himself and a keen patron of the arts. Today, his giant memorial rises grotesquely from Kensington Gardens, a rather bewildering sight to many of us. Representing the arts and sciences for which Prince Albert did so much, the memorial statuary looks out at something which the prince wanted but never lived to see. The Albert Hall, an amphitheatre for many functions, but chiefly for concerts like the London Proms, a major event each summer in the musical life of the capital. It is here at the Albert Hall, or the post-war Festival Hall on the Thames, that George Mickie may one day be conducting. London is not just an audience for the arts. With its varied charms and beauty, it has also inspired artists, composers and poets and painters too, many of whom lived here in Chelsea. Turner and Whistler and many other painters have lived and worked in Chelsea, walking in Cheyne Walk, where amongst the trees by the river, many of them have stood to paint their pictures. And some artists still come here to work today. It was in Chelsea that Roland Jarvis began his career. Born in Yorkshire and brought up in France, he didn't come to London till he was 18.
And that wasn't to paint. I had no intention of being an artist then. I'd never thought of it. I came here to study engineering. I trained at King's College and even worked as an engineer for a couple of years. But then somehow I got impatient with it all. I felt I had something to say which I couldn't say in materialistic terms. So I started looking at paintings. And in London, there's plenty of opportunity for that. There's the Tate, for instance, with all its modern paintings. I hope one day to exhibit there myself. The Wallace Collection and many others. And whatever kind of artist you are, you can't keep away from the National Gallery. I suppose it was here really that it started for me. Probably it was raining one day and just out of curiosity, I went in. I got so caught up in it all, so involved in the world of painting, that when I came out, I knew I was a different man. I was an artist. I was beginning to see. It's a fantastic place, this. Miles of galleries filled with paintings of every period. Dutch, French, Spanish, Italians, English. I come here a lot. Sometimes to learn, but more often just to enjoy myself. These Dutch paintings, for instance, what really astonishes me about them is the realism. These painters really were interested in life, the life of the ordinary people. And it's shown without any kind of glamorization. In fact, it's the sort of painting I should like to do. But often I forget completely when I come across a magnificent painting such as this Uccello battle scene. I just revel in it. The soldiers, the horses, the action, the whole setup of this battle on a stage. Of course, for different people, there are different paintings. I myself have a special interest in Renoir, for instance. The way he seems to know his people, the way he feels for them. I often study him for the sheer technique, for the sheer handling of the paint, the freedom of it all, the sort of joy with which it's all painted strikes very much for me. But whoever you are, there are hundreds of wonderful paintings to choose from in London's galleries. And not just paintings. Artists enjoy working in London because the city itself can give you so much pleasure if you go around with your eyes open.
In the beautifully restored round church of the Temple, in the masterpiece that is Westminster Abbey, in buildings from every period, London reveals its architectural splendors, from Norman times to those of Sir Christopher Wren. And from the ornate glory of St. Paul's Cathedral to the elegant classical houses of the 18th century. But in the 18th century, it wasn't just architecture that flourished. It was a golden age for all the arts. At that time, the Thames was bringing to the city of London the wealth of new lands abroad. The merchants grew rich and built large houses for themselves in what is now the West End. Though the poor dwelt in squalor, the rich lived well in these fine new squares and terraces, where they formed a great audience for the arts. Literature, for instance. Men like Dr. Smauel Johnson, who came to London from Lichfield in 1737 and lived for a time in Gough Square off Fleet Street, in a house you can still visit today. Johnson was not just a distinguished poet and critic. He was a brilliant conversationalist whose wit and forthright opinions made his fireside circle famous. Here he would sit in state and converse with his many friends, artists, politicians, poets and playwrights like Oliver Goldsmith, actors like his close friend David Garrick, at that time holding the stage at Drury Lane. For this was also a golden age for the theatre, the age of Garrick, and the age of Richard Sheridan, who was then writing comedies which still entertain us today.
But my dear Sir Peter, you always gave the provocation.
Now take care, my love. Contradicting isn't the way to keep friends.
Then don't you begin it, my love.
There, now you're going on. Don't you perceive, my life, you're doing the very thing which, you know, always makes me angry.
Then you know if you'll be angry without any reason.
There, now you want to quarrel again.
No, I don't, but if you will be so peevish.
Now, who starts first?
Why, you, to be sure, I said nothing. There's no bear in your...
At the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, Jennifer Patrick is playing the part we saw her preparing for, Lady Teazle in Sheridan's comedy The School for Scandal, a play which gets performed all over the world by actors today, but which was first produced in London in the 18th century, at the theatre where it was also written, the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. One of the oldest theatres in the world still in active use, Drury Lane has been under royal patronage since Charles II granted its first charter in 1663. Garrick, Kean, Mrs. Siddons, the greatest actors, played here. Shakespearean tragedy or Victorian melodrama, pantomime and gigantic spectacles have filled the theatre. Though the building has more than once been burnt down and rebuilt, it is still the Theatre Royal. And the people who work here today, getting ready for tonight's performance, are part of its long and colourful tradition. These are the heirs of those who first set the stage for the School for Scandal. And as the curtain rises, one can almost hear the echoes of Sheridan's comedy as its first performance delighted the society of the day in the boxes and tiers of this splendid theatre on that May evening nearly 200 years ago.
Well, I never will join in ridiculing a friend, and so I constantly tell my cousin Ogle, and you all know what pretension she has to be a critic on beauty.
Oh, to be sure! She has herself the oddest countenance that ever was seen. She's a collection of features from all the different countries of the globe.
So she has indeed. An Irish flood,
Caledonian locks,
Dutch nose,
Austrian lips,
complexion of a Spaniard,
and teeth a la Chinoise.
In short, her face resembles...
Such comedies reflected the social life of the times. In drawing rooms like these, society hostesses would entertain the celebrities of the day, and musical soirees were given in private houses at which leading musicians were invited to play. Composers like George Frederick Handel, who came to England from Germany to make London of the 18th century as rich in music as it was in the other arts. Music of its age, but music that is part of our heritage today. It was when Handel was composing his water music that London's parks came into their own. At one time, royal preserves, most of them were opened to the public by Charles II and the monarchs of the 18th century. These acres of grass and trees which spread their refreshing green across the very middle of the crowded metropolis. Here, in the 18th century, people came to see cockfights and horse racing, or to stroll by the lake which Charles II had made in St. James's Park and filled with some of the exotic breeds of waterfowl that you find here today. In those days, on a walk through the park, you could buy milk from milkmaids whose cows grazed by the trees of the Mall, which, long before the car was thought of, was the special resort of people of quality. But other gardens existed at this time, like these at Vauxhall, where all classes came to enjoy themselves in the evenings. There were fine promenades with gaily colored lamps in the trees, decorated alcoves, and concerts in the music room. Here, too, came an artist called Rowlandson to laugh at society in the raw and with his satirical genius paint these pictures. For this was also a great age for painting, when ladies of fashion would commission their portraits from artists like Gainsborough. As the London of this time excelled in the literature of Johnson and other great writers, in the theatre of Garrick and Sheridan, in the music of Handel, so too it excelled in the paintings of Hogarth, Gainsborough, and that other great portraitist, Sir Joshua Reynolds, who in 1768 became the first president of the Royal Academy, to whose summer exhibition at Burlington House, work is submitted from all over the country by hundreds of contemporary artists. But today's artists, like Roland Jarvis, paint very differently from those of the 18th century, because they live in such a different world. London today has all the massive but austere efficiency of the 20th century, and it's this with which its present-day art is in tune. London is changing and developing today as much as it's ever done in the past. But its architecture is as true to its time as was the architecture of the 18th century. The post-war Festival Hall on the Thames, a concert hall of revolutionary design, is as different from the Victorian Albert Hall as Victorian music is different from music today. Though the hall is for all kinds of music, the style of the building accords with the modern music of today, which young conductors like George Mickie from the Royal College will be interpreting here in the future. It's the same with drama. Jennifer Patrick is off to a theatre, but though she may walk by the statue of Irving, the 19th century actor, her theatre is as different from his as his was from Garrick's at Drury Lane in the 18th century. But the theatre, like all the arts in London today, however different from the past it may be, has nevertheless developed from that of its predecessors. The latest chapter in a story which for 300 years has been largely unfolding in London's West End.